Awesome. My name is Jeff Duffy. I'm the dev manager for ObjectRocket. I'm here to talk to you for just a couple minutes about using Python with Mongo. And I'm not going to bore you with going through all of the docs for PyMongo and sort of step by step. Really what I'm here to talk about is some of the things that might surprise somebody who knows a little bit of Python, knows a little Mongo, but hasn't used them together for any significant period of time. So, stuff I'm talking about, just a super quick high-level overview of PyMongo itself, what it's about, kind of how it works a little bit. Then I'll talk about some of the gotchas, some of the things that have caught us in the past and the lessons that we've learned from them. And then finally, some tips for building applications that use PyMongo as the primary persistent store. So what is PyMongo? It's the officially supported driver for Mongo in Python. You can install it via pip. It tries to build C extensions. You can install it without building C extensions, but it's about 20 times slower if you do. So production environments, you're going to want that to work. Basic features, CRUD, of course, right? All of the different sort of data manipulation things that you might want to do. The administrative features that you can find in the Mongo shell often have some sort of relevant thing in the PyMongo driver. And one of the most important things about understanding how to use PyMongo is types. It's the Python types, how they map to Mongo types, and what you can and can't do with them. The base connection type, Mongo Client, this is what we use to connect to Mongo in Python with PyMongo. There is a special connection type for replicate sets that's aware of their health, and you can find some other things about them. That typically isn't necessary unless you tend to do some kind of work with like infrastructure where you're really digging into the meat of what your replicate sets are doing. And it supports lots of different options when you connect for config. Obviously, if you build it with SSL, it'll support it. You can set write concerns, manage connection pool size, other things like that that are performance oriented. So database access. You take your client object and you tell it what DB you want to connect to, and now you have access to your database. In the same way, once you have a handle to a DB, you can access the collection that you need. Pretty straightforward stuff in Python. So I talked about types before. So PyMongo has a library that it uses internally to represent all of the things that it does with Mongo, and it's the bson library in Python. An example of why that's important and where it differs is object IDs. So when you want to work with object IDs in PyMongo, you need to use the bson object ID type, or you're not going to get the results that you're looking for. And as an example, I show you that when you do a search on object ID, if you don't use the bson object ID type, you're just going to get no results and you won't understand why. Well, that's because you have to use the object type so PyMongo can do the correct comparison and return you what it is that you're looking for. Return types, right? So you get different stuff back depending on how you query the database in PyMongo, and that's important to know. When you do a find one, you get a regular Python dictionary back, or none if what you're looking for isn't in there. But when you do a find, you get a PyMongo cursor. And with that cursor, you can do some interesting things. You can rewind it, you can skip, you can fast forward if you want to. And there's some tunable parameters inside the cursor that you can do at runtime. For instance, if you're stepping through a large set, you can actually set the batch size that you want to get back in terms of the number of documents, other things like that. Other types that matter in PyMongo, you should just know that true is true and false is false, upper, lower. PyMongo does this for you, but it does catch some people out when they want to do like copy paste searches and things like that. Don't understand why they're not getting the results they expect. If you're doing some more advanced Mongo manipulation in Python, some of these can become important to you. dbrefs, the max and min key. These are important because if you do simple comparisons with results that you do in queries in Python, you may not get the results that you expect if you don't understand that what PyMongo is returning to you are these custom object types and not a string or an integer or something like that. For instance, recently we've been doing some stuff with max and min key, and we had to dig in and understand that, oh, you get this max key object back, and you actually have to query that further to find the information that you're looking for to do comparisons that you want. So know that's there, and if something doesn't seem right, you might want to, as I said, run type and find out what you're getting back. This is just a little thing in there that I like a lot. It's save, and it's what it sounds like. You can get a document back from PyMongo, make some changes, call save on the collection, and PyMongo is smart enough to find the object ID, match it up, and update that document under the hood. It's a really nice shorthand for something that people tend to do a lot. So here's a common paradigm that we do in Python with Mongo. We build queries as dictionaries, right? Because dictionaries are the under the hood type that we use for almost everything. This really lends to cleaner code. This is a trivial example, obviously, but when you start having very complex queries with lots of in or equals or things like that, it can really clean things up to build the dictionary first and then feed it to your query or your insert or whatever it is that you need to do. Okay, so here's something you should never do. Dot notation. PyMongo supports the concept of saying, as I said here with your DB object, DB dot in the name of your collection dot, whatever you're trying to define or so forth. This is a terrible idea, and it's a terrible idea for two reasons. You're hard coding things in your code that you ought not to be, the names of databases, collections, things like that. But the other reason is this is obviously not supported if you want to operate on a collection that has a dot in it or a dash or some other character that's illegal in a collection name or a database name. You should always instead use the dictionary style, as I've done in all the other examples, where it's like a Python dictionary that you're accessing, even though under the hood, PyMongo is going to the DB or collection that you're looking for. Stuff that's not CRUD-oriented in Mongo that relates to PyMongo, right? So there's a bunch of helpers that exist in the JS shell that have been translated to the PyMongo, and they add a few more with every iteration. Things like ensure index, drop database, create collection, those now all exist as methods in PyMongo depending on which object you're operating on, whether it be the collection, the database object, or whatever. But as often happens when you're starting to do some really complicated under the hood stuff, you can always bail out to this, dot command. And that basically is equivalent to the JS shell's version of run command, where if you don't have the JS helper, you can always kind of dig under the internals and pass it what you want to do. Same thing with PyMongo, it's just command instead. And there's an example with DB stats right there. Insert order. This is something that bites a lot of people in Python when they start using Mongo for the first time. Because we use Python dictionaries as the natural type when we start doing things, Python dictionaries don't maintain insert order, which means, obviously, if you stick a bunch of stuff in there and you shove it into Mongo, it may not end up in the document in the same order that you created your dictionary. So how do we solve this? We use something built into Python itself. In the collections module, we have orderDict, and orderDict will do what you intend. You create an orderDict, you do the inserts. You can use, again, the standard inserts to take care of this, and under the hood, PyMongo knows what to do and maintains your insert order. This is especially important for things like creating indexes, because often the order in which you set your index keys affects the performance that you're going to see. And so this is something you're going to want to think about if you're creating indexes with PyMongo. Return order can be just as important. We had an example where we were doing some things and we wanted to show customers the shard keys that they had. And when we did the first iteration of that prototyping, it was in the wrong order, and this is why. Because when PyMongo returns documents as Python dictionaries, they're unordered. So they're just going to display in whatever order Python decides to give them to you. But PyMongo gives us a hook where we can pass this as class parameter and tell them what class we want it to cast to when it hands you back your results. In this case, orderDict again does the job just fine for a find one. And you can see here, I'm getting them back in the order that I inserted instead of whatever order it just happened to show up in my Python dictionary. Yeah, sorry, I'd like to make it bigger, but the screen's only so big.
That's awesome.
So, when you're working with Python and MongoDB, don't be long in forgetting MongoDB has its own restrictions that can affect how you write your code. The most common one of these is keys with a dot in them, right? So this is illegal in Mongo, we all know, because Mongo allows that dot access notation for subdocuments. But it's so common to write Python code that's going to just take a key that's programmatic, and you end up running into issues where when you try to do inserts or updates, you start getting invalid document errors because you're not allowed to do that. This is something to keep in mind, and so it goes to the larger idea of validation, where when you're working with your data, make sure you're thinking about this stuff before you start inserting and updating things, and always be prepared to catch them when they happen. So another thing is obviously MongoDB gives you plenty of rope to hang yourself. I think we're all familiar with this, where just because it's schemaless, that means that you have to be especially careful with this validation, where I can insert one kind of type for 90% of my documents. I make a simple code change, all of a sudden it's a different type. If you don't test well enough, that can cause some downstream problems that can really be difficult to solve. Another thing is that everything comes out of the driver as UTF-8. And so if you're using exotic character sets, or even non-exotic ones, Latin ones, some of these other things where when you do your insert, you're not acting as if everything should be Unicode, you can get some unexpected results when you try to do comparisons later after you've pulled that same data back out of the database. Obviously, the best idea here is to try to work with Unicode in all things and minimize your exposure there. And finally, 60 meg doc size limit for 2 and newer, 2.4, I don't know. 2.2. I'm not the Mongo expert here, but yeah, so that can run into problems where obviously I wouldn't advocate someone design an application that would shove that much data in a single document anyway, but if you're doing some fancy stuff with, I don't know, binary things or whatever, it's something to keep in mind. Because obviously Python doesn't have this restriction, so.
How do you do date time stuff for this?
Glad you asked that question. Dealing with times and days, super ugly, right? So first, MongoDB, we all know, has no idea of a date without a timestamp that I'm aware of anyway, but we did plenty of that stuff in our old applications, and so there was no way to store it except for casting the date times and ignoring the time version, which is kind of an ugly way to do things. PyMongo, in its current incarnation, still kind of does different things depending on whether you're inserting and pulling out data, which can cause you some serious surprises later on. Dumb date time by default is what you get regardless of client setting. If your server's not UTC, but your code thinks it is, it's going to get surprised, right? So now there's a new parameter in the newest versions of PyMongo, the TZ aware, that forces the server to be aware of its time zone and convert things to UTC before you get it back. But PyMongo will save date times thinking it's UTC, but it never actually checks, right? So you can have this sort of date time mismatch where you're pulling things that are converted to UTC back out, you're inserting local times, and all of a sudden, all your comparisons don't work anymore. So the lesson here is this: use UTC everywhere or you'll live to regret it. For serious. Datetime, UTC now, by the way. That's the right way to do it in Python. To get
Which one again? Wait, you say UTC now?
UTC now, right? Assuming you want now. I mean, obviously there's other UTC casts, but yeah.
One question, do you know of a good library for time management and stream parsing, all that in Python and out of Python for Python? What's the best library that you go for?
We've been able to do almost everything we want to with stuff built into the standard library.
Okay.
Most of what we do is programmatic comparisons, deltas, things like that, which are all built into the datetime modules.
Okay.
Occasionally we have to reach out to the calendar module. That provides a way to prettify some of the stuff that you want with datetime. But to date, we haven't had to go outside of the standard library. So, connection errors. If you're writing, and this is not obviously unique to Python, really in any language, you should expect them, and you should handle them, and you should do the right thing because they're going to happen. So, the PyMongo driver returns a special exception when it thinks you can recover from something like a replica set election. It's a guess, and the guessing is sometimes not very intelligent, but that's the way it works. And then it has another one that called connection failure it throws if it has no idea whether or not you're going to be able to recover. So I advise you to do two things. Centralize your connection logic in one module, reference it everywhere else. This is going to make it easier for you in the future to do things like, I don't know, improve upon your authentication if you decide you want to go do Kerberos or something equally crazy, you know, and you don't have to change your code in 50 places. Obviously always a good idea. But the other is this. All of your CRUD and connection operations should be wrapped in some kind of try-except logic where you retry some reasonable time or number of times or something like that. I can't tell you the number of people that I've talked to who've written applications who kind of put this off at the beginning. People start using their code, and all of a sudden it becomes like a multi-month effort to go back in and clean this all up to do what I'm talking about here. So super important to take care of it at the beginning. One great way to do this, something like an AutoReconnect decorator for all of your different methods where you can go in there and have a little bit of logic that says, hey, I'm looking for these exceptions. If I get them, maybe there's a max number of tries I want to try to reconnect before I go ahead and raise back up again because there really is a problem and I can't connect. Something as simple as this, you know, whatever it is, 15 lines of code, can save you tons of heartache when things happen like elections occur because of network hiccups or things like that, which are more common, obviously, than we all would like. So to sum up, the things that you should do to be successful with PyMongo, right? Understand the types that you're feeding it, what you're getting back, and how they're going to act. Obviously, this is most important with ordering. That's the thing that tends to bite people the most often. And there's special VSON types because Python's not going to yell at you if you get back a VSON max key type and try to compare it to an integer. It's just going to tell you that's false, right? Because you can't do that. So be aware of what's going on, and if you're ever in doubt, you can just go run type on that and see what it is, right? Fixed style notation for database collection access. Don't ever do anything different because people will make fun of you later if you do. Centralize your connection logic so you have, you know, some control around your authentication and things like that in the future. Please, for the love of God, expect and handle connection issues. This is going to happen. I guarantee it. It's probably most of the time not going to be the database's fault, and you don't want to end up having one of those flame wars between your app devs and your DBAs, you know, when it was a network issue. Because it's always the network guys. Don't let Python's dynamic nature lull you into this no SQL injection thing, right? So Python's super dynamic, Mongo is schemaless. This can lead us down a path of scariness where we start writing code that accepts like unvalidated data and shoves it in Mongo. And there's all kinds of scary things that people can do to you, just like they could when you were doing it with MySQL and PHP. So keep that in mind as you're writing your code. Do the smart and safe thing. Finally, again, UTC everywhere, or you're going to regret this. It will cause you issues. It will cause you no end of trouble, because when you try to go forward and fix it in the future, whether you're, I don't know, going to go try and change the time on your servers and then find out that there's elections everywhere because all of a sudden your op log times don't match anymore. You know, you try to fix it in the code instead, and then you have 6,000 lines of date time manipulation. It's a nightmare. So don't ever do anything but UTC. And that was it. So this is me, Jeff Duffy, ObjectRocket. We're hiring. We need basically all of the smart people that can do interesting things. DBAs, devs, UI guy, I'm looking for especially. We're doing some exciting things. We are building awesome stuff. We're doing things that nobody else in the community is doing. And we definitely want smart and really excited people on our team. So if you're interested, here's some contact information, objectrocket.com/careers. And is Matt in here? Matt is our recruiter. If you're interested, give him a shout later on, and he can hook you up with us, and we can talk. And then Kenny Gorman, my boss.
No, I have a question.
Yes. Yes, Kenny Gorman, my boss.
I'd like to know what version of Python to use and why.
Great question. So 2.7 is the best supported with PyMongo. Python 3 support is fairly recent in PyMongo. And obviously some of the under the hood type changes and things like that, it's supported by the maintainers. It's just not as well tested because obviously not as many people in the community are using 3 yet. So were I building a brand new application and this is a flame word itself, I would probably use 2.7 right now.
So just to comment on that, Bernie over at MongoDB Inc. is always looking for people to help hack the driver.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's a really pretty good community effort over there. There's a bunch of people that are contributing to that module. So if you're so inclined, go to GitHub and dig into that because they're always looking for people to help.
Awesome. So does anybody have any questions?
You have some nice code snippets on this. Do you have this somewhere?
I'm sure we can.
We have some of our open public Python scripts sitting in ObjectRocket GitHub.
We do, and some of the smaller stuff that you're talking about, I mean, I can go and put some gists up and things like that and share them out so people can get them. Sure. They're not big. Yeah.
So why ObjectRocket as a service provider versus hosting it locally or hosting yourself?
See, that's a sales question, man.
I know, but I'm interested because I have architectural needs for this, and I'm using it. I'm using certainly Mongo and Elasticsearch and all this, and we do hiring, by the way.
Yeah.
But ObjectRocket would be interesting to talk about. It's like things that come to mind are: do you support some of the things I'd like to do with Aggregation Framework and MapReduce and all that? What is there any limitations? I mean, help me understand how that works.
So I'd love to take a shot, but Kenny will do a better job.
So I can take that one. So we support when you sign up Mongo 2.4.6 is like our current release. It's what we feel is like the most stable and has the most features
That's
right
good,
now.
because otherwise you would break like 4 things.
Yeah. So we support all the things on that, right? Aggregation Framework. Don't necessarily recommend MapReduce in super huge production installs, but the Aggregation Framework works great. Highly recommend that. Pipelining operations are obviously pretty fun. They work pretty well. But yeah, not super limited. It's all SSD. It's super fast.
Server-side scripting as well. I mean, it's risky stuff. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah,
it
that's a
depends
good
on how much
question.
you trust.
We allow it. I would caution people against it because you are containerized, so you're not going to knock over anybody else,
Right.
But you are going to mess yourself up more than
Right.
likely.
More a concurrency issue.
I mean, there's things you can do in Mongo that you probably shouldn't do, agree, yet it's just enticing not to say, well, it's not that evil since we're going to be doing this soon. You kind of bridge. Of course, you'll never get to the soon.
And actually, now that I think about it, we don't give out admin access. I think that specifically blocks server-side scripting, if I remember. I'd have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it does.
Right.
Because that's obviously an escalation path if it doesn't lock it down to admin
You
users.
guys deal with a bunch of security policy enforcement and and all these sort of compliance type things where you can show audits, everything else that's going on, and there's a lot of data management and security stuff that you have to do it right, and hopefully you're doing that. Maybe I don't have to do it as much.
So I guess it depends on what certification level you're talking about, because I don't think that we really have any future plans for doing PCI just yet or anything on that level.
And Mongo's probably, I don't know, I mean, you might want to think about whether Mongo's the right place to do that. But on our side, in terms of security, so when you set up an instance, it's basically ACL off from the world. You have to open a port specifically for your app servers.
Good.
Mongo security is default and enforced. And then all of our systems are containered off from each other. So you're not really sharing, your kernel space is basically, essentially yours, your Mongo space is yours. So, that's just a few things. Frankly, we don't really sell ourselves as a PCI drop-in or anything like that, or HIPAA or any of those things.
Okay.
But try and make it, common sense, secure. We try and go above and beyond. The ACL stuff, no one else is really doing. Most folks, we provision instances wide open, and it's sort of like, if someone knew your connect string, they'd have your data.
Cool.
We don't do that, but it's meant to be a general purpose Mongo platform, right? So, easy to develop on, easy to build apps on, but still have enough security so, folks, it's trust, we just want folks to trust us.
And maybe last question, do you have any other data platforms you're putting next to that allow sort of an adjacency between Mongo? Things like Elasticsearch integration, things like, we're dealing with.
I'm only laughing because the answer is yes. So we are expanding our offerings over time. So stay tuned, we'll have some stuff out here shortly.
Awesome.
That'll be cool.
Look forward to it.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else? Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thanks guys, can I have some pizza?